The last incus release for 2024 is now available. So this is going to be your look into Incus 6.8. I'm Stefan Greber. I'm one of the maintainers of Incus. And let's look at what's new. So the first kind of headlight feature is now the ability to move a running virtual machine between storage pools. Particularly useful if you need to switch between different classes of storage. So if you're going from something like slower but distributed Ceph and you need to move that to a local storage, or if you need to go from, say, a nice cozy storage array using a VM cluster, again moving that to either then Ceph or local storage. It's pretty convenient. You can do that while the VM is running. It doesn't really get impacted. The one limitation to it is because this is effectively done through our live migration mechanism, we do require that the server is also changed at the same time. So you can't live migrate your storage from one storage pool to another while staying on the same system. This is basically because a number of our internal security policies and other kernel level configurations we need to do are tied to the instance itself, its UID, its name. And when we do that kind of storage live migration, we effectively need to run 2 copies of the hypervisor QEMU and then move from one to the other. We can't have 2 instances of QEMU running for the exact same VM on the exact same system currently. So that's why you need to also move the VM from one server to another while doing that. The second big feature contributed by a community member is support for the authorization scriptlet. We've been adding scriptlets in a few different places in Incus over the years. This started with the instance placement one, which is quite actively used by a number of people and allows for additional control on exactly how VMs should be placed or how instances should be placed, but also how they should be moved, rebalanced, or handled during an evacuation. So that was the first area where we did a scriptlet. Then we've added one for very low level interactions with virtual machines. So there's one that's specifically targeted at QEMU and allows you to interact with the QEMU internal API from a scriptlet. And now this is the third one that's being added to the code base, and it sits in the authorization code path of Incus. And so effectively, if you don't want to run something like OpenFGA to handle the fine-grained authorization control on top of an Incus server or cluster, now you can use this and load a scriptlet, so effectively what looks like a Python script, that is then called whenever an authorization decision must be made, and it can decide whether something is allowed or not, and can also log everything that goes through. The next one is a seemingly pretty simple one, but something that will make it a lot easier for folks to implement nice GUIs and web UIs. There's now the ability to get a very simple PNG screenshot of the virtual machine console. So you don't need to actually fully attach to the interactive console just to see what's going on. You can just grab it as a PNG through the API. Next up, we've got something for those using application containers, so our OCI containers. Technically, it's also useful for normal containers and virtual machines, but the bulk of the use case for this feature is going to be for application containers. So basically, with application containers, you often want to store your data completely separately from the container itself, because the container itself is mostly throwaway and something you can rebuild on a new image at any point. To make that work, usually create custom storage volumes and then attach those to specific paths within your containers. That works pretty well, except that for containers that don't run their main software as root, the default ownership for custom volumes, which is owned by root group, and only writable by root at the root of the path, but readable by everyone else. So it's effectively 0 UID 0 GID 755 mode. It's not a good fit, because now if your software in the container is running as UID 1000, it can't write to any of its extra volumes. Until now, the fix to do this was to manually go as root inside the container, change the ownership of those paths, and then and then things would work after a restart of the container. That's not exactly a good experience, not exactly something that can easily allow for automation of OCI containers with something like Terraform or Ansible. So now we have support for setting the initial UID, GID, and mode of a custom storage volume. So you can go and create a volume and call it, my application -config or something like that, set it to be tiny, and then initial UID, initial GID, set to the expected user UID and GID for the application you're running inside the container. And now when that container starts up, hey, it can actually directly go and write and interact with that volume right from the start. Next up is a tweak to the authorization model we've got in OpenFGA. So OpenFGA is the main authorization mechanism for incus, especially when used combined with OpenID Connect. And it's got an authorization model that describes a lot of the different high-level roles and their permissions on incus. One thing we had to change is there was effectively a role called viewer, which worked just fine at the instance level and at the project level. So it would let you have read-only access to either a specific instance for an entire project, but you couldn't actually apply it to the entire server because it had a different meaning on the server side. So when applied, effectively it was given to everyone by default on the entire server, and it was allowing read-only access to global resources, but to nothing else. That was kind of fine as a baseline, but we actually now have a few cases where we do want to give server-wide or cluster-wide read-only access to everything, not just the global objects, but also every single project and instances. That's particularly useful for anything that needs to do auditing or some of the backup systems and those kind of things. So we effectively did a bit of renaming and reshuffled things. So what used to be the default permission to have read-only access to those global resources, that got renamed from viewer to just authenticated, and there's automatic logic to migrate from one to the other on updates to incus 6.8. And now that freed the server-wide viewer permission to actually do what it's supposed to, which is if it is granted to a specific user or to a group, those affected are now allowed to view absolutely everything on the entire server or cluster with read-only permissions. On top of that, something that we found was useful is that there are a few config keys within incus that are sensitive, that are things like certificate private keys and those kind of things, which typically have been restricted so that only those with read access or edit access to the entire server were allowed to see those, and anyone who's got restricted access to the server or cluster don't. That works pretty well, but with some of the tweaks here, we don't want a global viewer access to necessarily have access to that. We wanted a bit more flexibility. So we effectively added a specific permission for it, which is can view sensitive, which is a server tied to the server object, and control specifically whether you're allowed to access those kind of sensitive configuration keys. That makes it easier to grant that just to specific users if you need to, and just makes things slightly more flexible and easier to manage for this kind of stuff. Next up, we've got a small improvement to the incus image import command, so that now you can feed an image to incus image import and tell it to go and replace through the reuse flag an existing image alias. So if there's an existing if that image alias is already applied pointing to a different image, the new image is imported, then the alias is deleted, replaced, and the old image goes away. So that makes it easier to import your own images into the server and have that identifier remain the same, and also not pollute the image store by keeping all of the old images around. And then we've got another small change, this time to incus-simplestreams. So if you're running your own image server and using incus-simplestreams to add and remove images from it, One thing that was a bit annoying is if you keep publishing images daily or something like that, then you have to keep track of your old images and remove them so that it doesn't, so you don't, the repository doesn't keep growing out of bound effectively. Incus-simplestreams prune now lets you fix that by effectively looking at, well, default configuration is to keep the 2 previous images for only one image. Anything else is gonna get deleted when you run it. It also does a few more steps, like it will actively look at whether all of the images files exist, and if they don't, then the corresponding index entry can go away. And to the reverse too, if you've got extra files on disk, can remove those because they don't belong to anything and they shouldn't be there. There's a dry run mode that you should probably be using to actually see what it would delete. Then if that makes sense, you can run it again. It will actually go in and perform the deletion. And one last thing, which is not really a new feature so much as a change in behavior that was worth pointing out. Console access has changed slightly with incus 6.8. One issue we had in the past, and actually a number of kind of related issues, were when connecting interactively to the console, whether it's VGA or text, only one user can be connected at any one time. That's just a limitation to how this all works. And what was done until now was that when whoever connects last kicks out whoever's already connected effectively, which is not always ideal because you might not realize that someone else is already working on it, and you might accidentally like make them do some work. It's not great. And there's also the issue when we start working with web UIs, where you're kind of the same thing. You kind of want to know if someone's already connected. You don't really want to have potentially like a dozen different web browsers looking at what they think is the same console, but then only the most recent actually sees what's going on. The others are just kind of frozen onto their half disconnected previous session. So to fix that, we effectively put a lock in place so that now you can get the console and interact with it. If anyone else tries to connect during that time, they will get an error saying someone's already connected. If you want to kick them out, use force. And there's a force flag that will then disconnect whoever is there. And that extra disconnection step actually means we get to fully clean up any remnants of that connection. So the clients will generally handle it better and actually show that they got disconnected instead of thinking they're still connected but are not, which was the previous behavior. All right, so that's it for the new features. Now let's go and play with some of those. So we're gonna start here with the storage live migration. So for that, let me get a shell. I need to go onto a server, into a test cluster effectively. So if I go on server 01 over there, that's the cluster that's already been showed in a, oops, I forgot exec, into quite a few videos. Okay, so this is a cluster of 4 machines. They're all online, everything is fine, and that's running on incus 6.8. So if we look at our instance list, let me just change the size a tiny bit. Okay, we've got a bunch of containers and virtual machines running on a number of machines. Let's just change the output a bit so we can see what's going on. So we want to see the name, the status. IP I don't care too much about. I want the type and location and I think storage pool. There we go. Okay. And technically we only care about virtual machines on this one, so let's do that. Okay, and let's look at our candidates. So those are the VMs we currently have running. You can see a bunch of them are on a shared storage pool, a bunch of them are on a local storage pool, and we can effectively decide what we want to do here. For example, we can see that the first Red Hat is currently running on local, whilst the rest is running on shared. So let's say we wanted to fix that. We can go and do move RH9v1, and we want to move it to a shared storage pool, and it's currently on server 01, so it needs to move away from that. So let's move it to server 02 and go. And while this is going on, the VM is actually perfectly operational. Actually, I just noticed I picked potentially a bad example because that one also has snapshots, which is going to make this slightly more annoying. at least slightly slower. But yeah, effectively it's on local storage pool. We want to move it to shared. So the VM is still running and it's just doing the background sync of the disks. It's gonna do that first snapshot, and it's gonna do the main state, and then it's gonna go and actually complete the migration. So if we go back and take a second shell on that same cluster here, demo. There. Okay, so if we go look, RH9v1, oh, also a bad example because it's a Red Hat VM without an agent running. So it's slightly annoying to show what's going on. But we can see it is still running. It's still on server 01. You should be able to actually get a text console maybe on it. Yeah, so text console is fine. I'm not exactly sure what that VM is doing, but anyway, we do get a text console on it. We can look at its uptime, maybe? No. I think I'm stuck in an init.rd or something like that on this system, but we get to see that it's been running for quite a while. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we're definitely in init.rd with a disk that was a bit sad. Okay, so that explains why that VM doesn't have an agent. I just ended up picking the broken VM out of the bunch. But anyway, we can see it's running. We'll be able to check post migration that it did not restart. And yeah, effectively, it's perfectly functional. You can interact with it perfectly normally during the entire process. It doesn't matter if it takes a while, which obviously depends on your storage. In this case, the local storage is actually pretty slow. So we're slowly reading that and writing it to the persistent storage. It's also not a particularly small VM, so we might have as much as 10 gigs of data to actually go and transfer, in this case, from the local to remote storage pool. But once that's all done, then the VM will just have moved and will be good. Just gonna leave that in the background, get back to it in a few minutes. But let's look at the next feature. So next up is the authorization scriptlet. So for that, I've got a VM running here. Let's go in there, and this effectively has a perfectly clean copy of incus installed. So we're just gonna do admin init, get it configured with just basic default. You can see it's incus-68. Now, what I want to do is have it listen on the network. So we'll just do that, and then get a token so we can add it as a remote. So do demo scriptlet and then the token. Oops, remote add. There we go. Okay. So now if I look and do demo scriptlet, here we go. We can interact with it, and let's just launch a container on there. Okay. So currently this is working perfectly normally. It's just incus running in a VM. It's connecting from the CLI is connecting to it using a TLS certificate with the trust add mechanism. And this is just working. Now, what if we want to change that a bit? So to do that, we're gonna go and actually write a small scriptlet. So let's do auth.py. And the entry point, so I'm basically reading from the documentation there, but the entry point for it is a function called authorize. And that function is provided effectively three variables. So it's provided details, the object itself, and entitlement. So that's roughly what it's provided there. I'm just gonna go check something else in the doc, kind of screen here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we do that, and then in here, what the function needs to do is just tell us whether this is allowed or not. And you just, oops, wrong shell there. So let's just allow everything. So just return true, but then that means we get to actually log kind of what's going on. So we can do log error, and we can go with let's show the object and the entitlement. So let's do that. Oops, there. I'm not sure what's gonna look like if we dump details, but let's see. Details effectively tells you who the user is. So in this case, it would tell me the certificate that I'm using. So let's just dump everything we have that way. And then we need to actually set that into place. So it's a server config key. It's called authorization.scriptlet, and we can just feed it the script in place. And now do monitor and log level error, and we only want to look at the logging stuff. Okay, so now we can see what came in. For that one request, we effectively had three requests. So one came in with username. Here is the certificate fingerprint. The protocol is TLS, so that means that we are using just a TLS-based authentication, not OIDC. And the request is only asking for a single project, and we know what project it was, which is default. Then that initial request asked us for the permission to view the basic server config endpoint. So I think that's what we would get. So if we just do a raw query, so if we just query something like that, we see that just talking to the API does those two requests effectively. So we get can view for the just the read-only access to the root of the API, and then the can view sensitive, which is what I described earlier in the OpenFGA case, where we've got that new entitlement to limit who can actually look at the server config. So right now, I can see the entire config in this case. Now let's see if we can go and change that. So if I go edit my script, and we know the entitlement is can view sensitive, we can make it so if entitlement is can view sensitive, then return false. Then load a scriptlet in place. And now I can't see the config anymore. I can still access the rest, but I can't see the config anymore. So that effectively exposes, that makes it pretty easy to do any kind of filtering you want, whether it's based on the object you're looking at, the actual user connecting, or the specific permission. You can play with all of that now from effectively a Python script instead of needing to run OpenFGA. So that makes it easier in many cases to just do some basic authorization control that way, and get more exposed, and also lets you do it on top of standard standard TLS certificate in this case, instead of needing to use OpenID Connect. And in this case, I'm also logging everything into the, since it's at the error level, it shows up all in the log file, so we can see what's going on. All right, so that's it for the new authorization feature. The next step is console screenshot for VMs. So obviously I have a VM running here, console v1 I was using. If I was to connect interactively, we can see here Debian login, the Debian login prompt. But doing this would have disconnected anyone else. Now, if I want to just get that PNG, it's exposed only through the API because it's really meant for GUI tools and for the web UI. It doesn't make that much sense in our CLI tool to have that just yet. But you can use the incus query commands to directly access the API. And then you can do console. And in this case, I need to specify what project it's in. And the type is VGA. So if I do that, I get a bunch of PNG data. So I can then write it to a file. And if I go look at this, there you go. We've got a screenshot of the console. So it's basically that simple to just now get the VGA output, and doing that would not impact in any way on someone who's connected to it. I can actually show you that. So if I get the command for the PNG, okay. So if I'm connected to the console and someone else goes and run it, I'm still connected. That has no impact whatsoever, and we get a refreshed look. I mean, let me actually do. So if I type demo here, refresh this, there we go. So it's just a screenshot. It doesn't impact anyone who's connected. Cool. Next up is the initial owner and mode for custom storage volumes. So for that, let's create not an application container, but just a normal container. So just create a container. There we go. And then we'll do a couple of volumes to just show what that looks like. So if you do a normal, just a normal custom storage volume, so we'll just do demo-default, and I don't know, let's give it 1 gig. Okay, then I add that to C1, so I do demo default, it's a disk, the pool is default, the source is demo default, and we want it mounted on mount demo default. There we go. Okay, and then the second one we'll use a new option, so to initial UID 1000, initial GID 1000, and initial mode. Let's do something that's a bad idea, but just make it wide open. And demo, let's do demo initial. Okay, so now I've got that second volume, and we can add it into the container as well. Okay, and now if I go look inside the container and we go look at our mounts, we can see the first one showed up as root 755, second one showed up as 1000, 777. So that works exactly as expected. I said, like, those are initial values only. So if you change that, like, it makes no sense to change it later. It's only useful at creation time. And it just sets that initial value. Like, there's nothing that prevents you from going to change it afterwards. Like, that's still perfectly fine. But it does let you set the initial value. All right. Next up is changes to the OpenFGA model. So it's just internal changes to the model. It's not really visible in any ways externally, so I can't really show that. So I'm just gonna skip that. The can view sensitive extra entitlement I showed through the scriptlet, so you get to see that one at least. Then we've got image alias reuse. Actually, let's just check on our first demo, see what's going on. And yeah, that VM is all kind of weird and broken. Nice. Can't do this thing. Yeah, okay. So we just hit a bit of a snag with that one. That's interesting. Don't know, can we try another one? Because yeah, that one had some weirdness. Maybe U24 wants to move. I think that's the one I did in the screenshot. So let's see if we can move that one, or if something's wrong with that test cluster. All right, let's try moving that one instead. I know the error we got on the existing one here. That's related to another bug fix that we did. So we need to tell block discards to be a bit more aggressive and ignore the fact that there's existing partitions. That's going to be an easy fix. So that will actually be there probably by the time most people see that video, the fix will be in there. But let's try this other VM that doesn't have snapshots. That's not, currently half corrupted disk as far as I know. We're pretty rough on that cluster. Like, this is a mostly development cluster with a bunch of different VMs. That's where I do like all of the testing for what happens if if a machine suddenly dies and everything needs to be respawned somewhere else. So basically none of those containers or VMs had like a good life where they were shut down properly. They usually tend to have their power just yanked underneath them, and that can cause some fun on a disk side. Anyway, gonna try and move that one instead. If not, I'll just show the screenshot of it and what that's supposed to look like. All right, moving back. So next up is image alias reuse and import. So if we look at our image list here, we've got a few things. Let's put, so let's say we've got an alias in here, so I'll create an alias called foo, and we'll put it onto that jammy image. So now we've got foo, and that container image has the alias assigned to it. Now let's say we had an image we can import. So for that I can just grab a basic, let's say an alpine edge image. Okay. There should be two files out of that. So there's rootfs squashfs, and then there's a tar.exe. Yeah, there we go. incus-tar.exe and rootfs squashfs. Okay, so if we want to import that and they're in the wrong order, it's always the metadata first, then the disk. We can now tell it, import it, set the alias to foo, and I want to reuse the alias. And if we go look, now the jammy image is gone, it's been replaced by foo. So it's basically that simple. But if you're building your own images and loading them into Incus, that can be quite convenient to avoid the images just starting to pile up, or you having to do that cleanup yourself. And next up is simple streams. That one I can't easily show because I'm not actually used incus simple stream stuff. The public image servers we're running are on a much older code base from quite a while ago and haven't moved yet to incus simple streams. But for anyone who uses it, I would just say, yeah, use incus simple streams prune, and then run dry run to see what would be deleted. And you can also play with the R flag to control the amount of images you want to retain on top of the current version of it. So the default is 2, you could go as low as 0, or you could go for higher value. And if the idea is that you should be able to probably automate that command, like putting a daily cron or something, like after you publish, run prune to clean up the rest. After you've done a few tests with dry run to make sure it does what you want. And last up is instance console locking. So let's see. If I access, say, the text console here on v1, so I've got the text console connected, and I want to do it again from the second one. Oh, crap. Okay, what's going on? We might actually have another interesting slight issue here. Let me check on the VGA console. So VGA console is connected. Now let's do it again. This just worked. Do I always set false? Is that what's going on here? I might just have my machine configured to always false. Whoops. Let me just go and check in a clean environment. So if we go in that VM here, and for this one will behave. So if we do console on this guy, okay, I got the text console and console here again. There we go. So that works correctly. My machine is just running with a config where I'm very aggressive on that stuff by default. So in that clean environment, we can see incus console shows the console is already connected. Force is required to take over. So it didn't impact at all the existing session. And if you do want to take it over, then you can do force, which then disconnects this one, no, the existing session, and gives us the session ourselves to interact with. So that's basically what there is to it. Just makes it less likely to interrupt someone else's job by accident. It's particularly an issue with the UI. So if I install the UI on here, incus UI canonical. Okay. I think the version of the UI we have right now doesn't know about force, so that might not work super well, but let's just open that. Where did it open it? Unable to connect. That's weird. Oh, right, okay. Because I called it v1 here, it's not actually v1, it's demo scriptlet we called it earlier. There we go, that's much better. Let me just show you what showed up in the web browser. So if I actually grab that URL and dump it in a web browser here, okay. So here we go. We get to see the web UI. The problem with the UI is that it's very easy to get a console. You literally just click and you immediately get into a console or into a terminal, which is obviously a bit of a problem in this case since it would immediately disconnect whoever is connected. So that's not, yeah, that's a bit of an issue, and that's the reason why we've got now the false flag, because that means that in the UI it will show, hey, there's already someone connected. Do you really want to connect? And then you decide to kick them out, instead of you just open the wrong tab in your browser and you immediately disconnect whoever is on it. All right. So that was the overview for incus-68. Actually, let me just go see. Okay, and the move worked properly with that VM. Nice. So U24v1, let's go look into it. The other one must have just been way too messed up by this point. It's been running for 9 days, so as you can see, obviously has not been restarted as part of this. And if we look, U24v1 is now on shared storage instead of local as it was before. So that works basically exactly as expected. Makes it easy to move from one server to, or from one storage pool to another, with the caveat that you need to also move it from one server to another. And with that, that completes the overview of incus-68. So those were the main features there. And it should, it's like incus-68 is already available for those using the Xabli packages. We've got the clients available as usual in Homebrew and Chocolatey, and we expect that incus-68 should start showing up in all of the other distros pretty shortly. Actually, one quick update on that. We do have now, so if we go look at Linux containers, docs main, we actually have availability within OpenFGA. So that was a niche. That was something that was requested for a while. We're kind of waiting for packages to make their way in there, and now it's there. So if you're on OpenFGA, you can install using Zypper. So Zypper install Incus, and you're gonna get Incus up and running on there. And that's starting currently in Tumbleweed or OpenSteel Leap 15.6. That basically rounds up the distro selection. I think the only one we're waiting to have a slightly better answer for are the Red Hat Enterprise Linux derivatives, so like on the server side, where there is an EPEL build of Incus that exists. I don't think it's widely available yet. So that's basically the only case there, but in specific cases, like for example, the Rocky, we do have instructions for that one, and there's a decent chance you can get that working the exact same way on, say, Alma or CentOS or even Red itself. So we basically have Incus available everywhere by now. Took us, I guess, about a year to get to that point, but it's great to see. And now hopefully everyone actually keeps the packages updated in those distros, whether it's sticking to our LTS release or to our monthly releases. And we've got options for everyone. All right, so that's it for incus-68. If you've got any questions about it, feel free to leave them down below, or you can jump on the community forum and ask over there. And I'll see you in 2025. Happy holidays, and yeah, see you in the new year. Bye.